Hello, fans, and welcome back to the College Sports Superfan. I previously made a video talking about five coaches who I think could be in for a monster year in college football. And today, we're going to break down five coaches who I believe could possibly be gone by the end of 2025. For one reason or another, these could be coaches that could be ending up in bad circumstances that could lead to them possibly being fired or retiring in some cases by the end of 2025. So let's get right into it as we get closer to the college football season. The first head coach I'm going to start off with is head coach Mike Locksley out of Maryland. The Maryland Terrapins went just 4-8 last season, which was a huge disappointment, and now they're having to rehaul pretty much their entire roster. The good news for Maryland is that their first three games are very, very easy, so in theory, the Terps should start out 3-0. But then from there, conference play gets really difficult, and they just don't have a whole lot of talent to compete with some of the other teams in the Big Ten. In fact, if you look at all nine of Maryland's conference games, they're likely going to be underdogs in all nine of them. Maybe they pull off a win or two somewhere here or there, but chances are they're going to have a losing season. They lost their star running back in the transfer portal. They're bringing in a quarterback in Billy Edwards who just hasn't really done too much up to this point in college football. And the defense also is having a massive overhaul. I think this Terps team is going to go 3-9, losing their last nine games in a row, going 0-9 in conference play. And I really don't think Coach Locksley, after what happened last year and with how I think this year is going to go, is even going to make it to the end of the season. The next coach I'm going to be talking about is also a head coach in the Big Ten, and that is Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. Now, Kirk Ferentz is entering his 27th season as head coach of the Iowa Hawkeyes. That's literally longer than I've been alive, and all of the Iowa Hawkeye students have been alive. So that's pretty wild. Also, on top of that, Kirk Ferentz has said that he is absolutely not retiring before the season ends. I had to look this up just to make sure, but he has said he is not retiring by the season's end. However, Iowa's had some really good seasons recently despite a terrible offense with an elite defense and elite special teams. But that has also been in part because of their schedule has been pretty favorable over the years. The Big Ten, as we know, when it split up its two divisions into a Western and an Eastern half, that the Western half of the Big Ten conference has been a lot easier than the Eastern half. In the Eastern half, you had Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan all on that side. And in the West, it was just kind of a hodgepodge of who ends up showing up that season. And Iowa was a big benefit of that. And last year, Iowa's schedule was very Big Ten West ish, like they're used to. But this season, with the conference expansion previously and with all the schedules being changed up, Iowa has drawn a much tougher schedule than they're used to. And you look at this schedule for the Hawkeyes and yeah, it gets pretty tough. Obviously, they have to go on the road against Iowa State, who they lost to at home last season. Really should have won that game. Lost on a last second field goal. They go on the road against an improving Rutgers team. They host Indiana, who made the college football playoff last year. They're on the road against Wisconsin. That's a toss up. They host Penn State. They host Oregon. They're at USC. They're at Nebraska. That's a lot of toss up games, and obviously, I don't think Iowa loses every single one of those, but they would have to win a few of those toss up games just to have a winning record. I think Iowa's probably going to go 5-7 or 6-6 with the way this schedule lines up, which is not what Hawkeyes fans are used to. They're used to winning seasons consistently. Iowa does bring in a new quarterback and Mark Gronowski, who's from South Dakota State, who's won two FCS national championships as the South Dakota State Jackrabbit starting quarterback. He's got a ton of experience, super talented quarterback playing in his final year of college football. But even still, it's the defense for Iowa that might take a step back, losing a ton of key starters. And I just think the Hawkeyes are going to be mediocre. And if that's the case, if they end up 5-7 or 6-6, Coach Ferentz may just change his mind about retirement. Okay, this next one is going to sound a little bit more out there, but I'm actually going to say Brian Kelly at LSU. LSU always has extremely sky high expectations, and this season is absolutely no different as LSU is returning maybe the best quarterback in the SEC this year in Garrett Nussmeier, especially when you include the experience that Nussmeier has along with his NFL caliber talent. However, LSU, of course, has a tricky schedule. They have to go on the road to play Clemson in week one, plus playing a lot of their typical SEC rivals, teams like Alabama, teams like Texas A&M, Oklahoma, who should be improved thanks to John Mateer coming in. It's going to be a trickier schedule for LSU. And if you look at the 12-team college football playoff, based on what we saw last year with Alabama and South Carolina, both going 9-3, but missing the college football playoff. Going 9-3 is going to be hard to make it. You really feel like LSU has got to go at least 10-2 to secure a playoff spot, and that could all be determined by that week one game in the other Death Valley against Clemson. And a key point of emphasis here is that LSU has lost four straight, maybe it's five straight. There's at least four straight season openers. And obviously, those season openers have been against tough teams, other power conference opponents. But they cannot afford to lose to yet another season opener. And Clemson, more than likely, is going to be in the top five, at least in the top 10, but I would say probably in the top five to start this upcoming 2025 season. So the expectations are sky high, but it's going to be a difficult schedule. And Brian Kelly may not make the 12-team playoff once again. And that could be just enough for the LSU donors to say, yep, we're done with you. We're going to find some way to buy out your expensive contract. I personally thought when Luke Fickell was hired from Cincinnati to be Wisconsin's head coach that it was absolutely going to be a home run for the Wisconsin Badgers. However, things have not gone their way lately, and last season Wisconsin went 5-7, which was the first time in over 20 years that Wisconsin did not make a bowl game and had a losing season. So, definitely not something that Wisconsin fans are necessarily used to. And you look at the talent they have coming into this season, and it is somewhat questionable. Wisconsin does have a talented secondary, although there's some new controversy with one of their young up and coming stars flipping to Miami absolutely last second. Wisconsin is now in a lawsuit against the Miami Hurricanes for potential tampering. And that's a whole separate topic and a whole separate thing. There's some other really good videos that have been put out there already from Embrace the Grind and also uh, Scott Fisher as well on YouTube. So those are some really good videos talking about this particular controversy. But here I'm just going to focus on what Fickell's got going on this upcoming season. Wisconsin has the toughest strength of schedule in out of all the Big Ten teams heading into this season because not only do they play most of the best teams in the Big Ten this upcoming season, but they also play Alabama on the road in the non conference. That's almost certainly going to be a guaranteed loss. They've got a lot of matchups on their schedule that are toss up games, some that are also guaranteed losses as well. So you look at this team, and it's probably going to be another 5-7, maybe even 4-8 season. And if that happens, back to back losing seasons, Coach Luke Fickell might just be the fall guy in Madison. The last coach I'm going to talk about here is also somewhat sad, as this is Mark Stoops at Kentucky. And Mark Stoops is the best thing to happen to Kentucky Wildcats football since The great Bear Bryant was there and helped Kentucky win a national championship. But Mark Stoops is coming off of a 4-8 season at Kentucky, where the one highlight was upsetting Ole Miss at one of the top games of the year and ruining the Rebels' playoff hopes. That win basically secured Stoops another season because without that, they would be 3-9 and just not a whole lot of good things to show for. They're bringing in a really good transfer portal addition on the defensive line. So they have a good defensive line coming up. They're bringing in an experienced veteran quarterback in Zach Calzada, who tore it up the last 2 years at the FCS level. But previously at Texas A&M at the FBS level, he wasn't all that impressive. But maybe he's learned a lot and grown a lot. It's just kind of hard to evaluate how good Calzada is going to be heading into this season. And the weapons around him don't seem to be incredibly impressive. And you look at the schedule too. This is the other tricky part. The schedule is really tough for Kentucky. I don't think there's very many coaches that can navigate such a difficult schedule. They're going to play Toledo in the non conference, which Toledo might be the best team in the entire MAC. And Toledo's got a really tough schedule, I will say, in terms of their non conference. But they will play the Toledo Rockets. They're going to have a rematch against Ole Miss very early on, and the Rebels are absolutely gunning for revenge. And they've got an intriguing team as well. So Ole Miss going to be pretty good once again, and they're going to be gunning for revenge against Kentucky. And after that, they have a really tough SEC schedule. They go at South Carolina, then at Georgia, then they host Texas, then they host Tennessee, then they go at Auburn, host Florida, at Vanderbilt, and then at Louisville. The easiest, quote unquote, easiest matchup on that entire, was that 8 game slate is probably the home game against Tennessee, probably the most winnable. That's likely going to be a nighttime game in Lexington for the Bourbon Barrel. But Kentucky has not fared very well against Tennessee in their all time rivalry history. So it's really tough to pick Kentucky to beat Tennessee unless Tennessee is just really bad, which I don't think Tennessee is going to be super bad this year. I don't think they're going to be top tier like they were last season, but I don't think they're going to be super bad this season. So that's likely a loss. At Auburn's likely a loss. I mean, all of those games are likely losses where Kentucky's going to be the underdog in all 8 of those games, plus the underdog against Ole Miss, plus possibly losing to Toledo. And with that, there's only 2 wins in that whole thing. If they go 2-10, I really find it hard to believe that Coach Mark Stoops is going to be returning to Lexington, Kentucky next season. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching the College Sports Superfan. Please make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see some more content. I know it's been a few extra days, but just having some fun celebrating this Independence Day. And I hope that everybody had a really great Independence Day weekend for this 4th of July. Thank you all so much for watching and supporting, and I'll see you guys in the next one.